Hello, welcome to another episode of Holyrude Ungagged. Usually I record these intros before the podcast. This is a bit different. I'm recording it after I've completed the podcast. So I can honestly say that you're in for a treat because I think it was a really good one. We speak about a lot of different topics. Deborah, who is a long-standing fan of Willie Rennie, is obviously in mourning at the moment because the news that he's standing down as the leader of the Lib Dems in Scotland. Where will we see his like again? No more will we see people sitting in giant deck chairs and posing with every single farm animal under the sun. We talk about all the chaos that's been going on in Downing Street recently, which is not exactly new. All the stuff with the England football team and the cancellation of their reception and Boris's unwillingness, shall we say, to go into self-isolation like all the plebs have to do when they get told by track and trace that they have to self-isolate. We also have a more discussion of Tory corruption. It's becoming so easy every week to find a story just to put out there. And we have a wee laugh at the continuing decline of the far-right GB News network. It actually wound up with no viewers at certain points this week. Then we have another discussion about another leader that stood down, Shin Berry of the Green Party of England and Wales, not the UK Green Party, as it's getting reported some places. She's standing down because of deep divisions within the Green Party of England and Wales around trans rights. Let us know what you think of the length of the podcast. This one's a bit shorter than some other ones. We have a long-running debate. I like to exhaust topics and let the podcast run on for as long as it takes. Deborah and Brian, they're more keen on a kind of more tighter, sharper podcast that comes in maybe around about the hour mark. So it'd be interesting to know what you guys think. So let's get ungagged.
And it was nice to hear you smile. Dream a dream 'cause you'll never die. The stars will never overtake the sky. Life has its turns and it takes a while. And it was nice to hear you smile. Nice to hear you smile.
Good morning, everybody. It's another sunny day where I am in the Blantyre Free State. Deborah, Brian, good to see you again. How's things going with you?
Hello. Good morning. Apart from spilling coffee all down myself just before the pod, it's a lovely morning. It's been a great weekend. I was at Burnt Island at the shows and it was nice. It was exciting.
I love the shows.
I am the biggest carnival geek. I love it.
It's just so much fun. And but the weather's also nicer because it's not as boiling hot as well. But it's still nice. It's a happy time.
Well, it's only 10 in the morning, so there's time. I think it's due to get hotter as the day goes on.
Is it?
Apologies to anybody if they can hear it in my voice. I'm not very well at the moment. It's not COVID though, I'm happy to say. I had my PCR results this morning that gave me the all clear, but it didn't make me feel much better because I still feel rubbish. So if my voice starts going, I might need to get Brian or Deborah to step in as temporary host.
I like the husky sound. You could be a movie actor with that.
Matinee idol. Let's start talking about the very first and very sad news that came in today. Well, not today, but the other day. That Willie Rennie, after 10 years standing down as Scottish Lib Dem leader, became leader in 2011 in the back of a disastrous Scottish election result, which saw the Lib Dems plummet from 16 to 5 seats in the Scottish Parliament. 10 years later, he leaves his job in the back of another disastrous election defeat, which leaves the Lib Dems on 4 seats. Initial thoughts when they heard that hammer blow of news coming through, the idol of Scottish politics is gone. Deborah?
I was devastated. I really, really like Willie Rennie. I don't particularly like his politics, as we've mentioned before, but just as a character, he's something else, and I'm really going to miss him. Do you know that he done the Kelty coal race? Did you know that?
No.
I knew he was a runner.
You carry 50 kilograms of coal on your neck and run up Kelty Main Street, which is a big hill. And he done that, and his first time he tried it, he came second. I think that's astonishing. We Willie Rennie. I'm going to miss him. I really am. I'm going to miss his capers, really. The stunts he gets up.
It's the best word to describe it.
But I'm going to miss him. Best of luck to the guy. And I hope he takes the coal sack racing seriously. He could be a champion.
A whole new career awaits him. You might still see me. I'm still going to be an MSP for at least another 4 years or so.
Good.
So-
I hope he still gets out the big deck chairs and does vaulting over bales of hay and stuff like that.
Brian, initial feelings, thoughts, and the sad news.
I wasn't really quite surprised to hear it based on the introduction you've just given on his actual electoral performance and whatnot. But 10 years is a long time to be a leader of a political party generally, especially one that doesn't really go anywhere. But I definitely sympathise with some of what Deborah's saying, because he is a little bit of a character and he's funny and runabout, and it's almost like there is a cringe factor to it too, which I always enjoy. I love a bit of a cringe factor with some of these photo ops and discussions and whatever. And absolutely echo what Deborah's saying about his politics. The Lib Dems frustrate me no end, particularly about, I think, because Willie Rennie's sort of go-to is always talking about the mental health. We need to sort the mental health waiting lists out. But Lib Dems do nothing else to address mental health issues like work and all these types of things. So that's one separate thing. But Willie Rennie himself is, I think it might be a little bit less jovial in places. I think the debates, you always know that he's always just going to smile and just be happy, and that's a nice thing. It's a positive thing, because especially when you've got big titans like Nicola Sturgeon and people going head to head and stuff like that, and then you've just got someone smiling and laughing and almost looking like awkward, and then just putting his perspective across, which is just such a lightweight touch to the political debate, but it's funny. So yeah, it is quite sad news in a sense, but do I think it will change Scottish politics fundamentally? Well, it depends who's going to get it, and I think we all know where this is headed.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a wee minute.
That worries me even more. So yeah, absolutely. That makes me feel even more sad that Willie Rennie's leaving.
Are you going to miss him, David?
Yeah, I mean, I met Willie Rennie once not long after he became the Lib Dem leader. He came to my work and he was really nice and really down to earth. Like most of my colleagues didn't have a clue who he was, and they were very confused because there was an HR guy in my work called Willie Rennie. So they were all just relieved to hear that HR weren't coming when they realised it wasn't him. And like I said, he just introduced himself as Willie. He didn't sort of come in as like some kind of VIP guest. And as much as I kind of took the mick a wee bit in my intro there, he really is a hell of a job trying to build the Scottish Lib Dems, who are just in a downward spiral ever since the coalition deal that they made, the UK party made. They've just been doomed. So really, historically, we might look back at Willie Rennie and people might say what an amazing job he did to actually keep them alive for 10 years, because who knows what the next 10 years holds for the Lib Dems. I can't really see them making any kind of comeback. Deborah?
This is nothing to do with what we're talking about. Did I just see something fly across your bed?
It'll be the kitten.
Right, okay. I thought you had an intruder.
Or Matthew.
Is Matthew on the bed?
He is. That's why I had to jump up and sneak away there to give him his dummy back.
All right. I'm sorry. I just saw something fly across the bed.
It wasn't the baby. It was the cat.
That's
It was
right.
a kitten.
Sorry to interrupt the flow there.
It's such a
what were we
great
saying
comment.
We were just talking about Willie Rennie and how awesome he is.
You're such a fangirl.
He's the son of a minister. And
I didn't know that.
Son of a
Did you?
preacher man.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to start singing. But
Oh man, sorry.
it's all right.
Please do it anyway.
No, you're all right. I'll save you yours.
I might be able to do it with a husky voice I've got with a sore throat.
Oh, very much so.
So Willie Rennie, he was politically not one of a political bedfellow of ours, but we're able to reach across the aisle and appreciate him for what he is, and I hope he enjoys his semi-retirement now that he's no longer Lib Dem leader. Now it's time to talk about the bookie's favourite to replace him. As we said, the Lib Dems only have 4 MSPs, and I think it's most likely to be almost certainly be an MSP that replaces him. And obviously one of those MSPs is Willie Rennie, so that only leaves 3 potential candidates. And from some of the soundings so far, it sounds as if 2 of them are interested in the job, which leaves Alex Cole-Hamilton as the front runner to be coronated as the new Lib Dem leader. Some people might be thinking, how do they know that name? He's most famous for telling ISNP minister to fuck off during a committee meeting, which is pretty much his claim to fame in politics at the moment, because that's the first thing I think of when I hear his name. Thoughts, Brian?
when it comes to Alex Cole Hamilton, there's always a tweet I remember that sticks with me that makes me cringe more than a Willie Rennie photo op. And it's when he's talking about the night of the Scottish referendum. And I think he was in London wearing a kilt, walking through the streets, and everyone's saying, please don't go, we love you. And of course, we can all decide whether that actually happened or not.
That definitely happened.
As somebody who lived in London for a long time, for a while, I don't think that happened. But anyway, yeah, Alex Cole Hamilton, I think, is, because Lib Dems are never going to be a huge political force in Scotland for the foreseeable, right? So that's, caveat that it's not the biggest risk to democracy as such. But I think Alex Cole Hamilton himself is really problematic. I think that he has a grandiose around himself and how he conducts himself. I think his behaviour during the committee that was doing the investigation of sexual harassment, particularly around Nicola Sturgeon's questions and the leaks and all that kind of thing that came out of that committee, and his sort of attitudes, similar was quite not very professional, shall we say. So I think that Alex Cole Hamilton is just somebody that I'm not warmed to, whether it be, because Willie Rennie, I completely disagree with his politics, but there's a warmth there. Alex Cole Hamilton, I would say there's definitely a repel for me personally with Alex Cole Hamilton. He just, not looking forward to that one.
He comes across really sort of vitrolic. Is that the right word? I find ACH, is that the right? I'm not even, what is wrong with me this morning? I've got more coffee down my top than in my brain. I find him really vitrolic. I think he's just very bitter, and as you say, he's full of himself. He thinks he's better than everybody. That's very annoying. And I don't think he'd be a worthy replacement, my boy, Willie Rennie. I mean, I think that's a high standard to reach anyway, Willie Rennie. Not necessarily in the outcome of the vote, as David said, he's not done very well there. But just as a person, as a charismatic sort of leader, Willie Rennie definitely had something.
Partly, I think Willie Rennie standing down is because what else has he got to do in politics? He's had a photo op with every farm animal, and you saw all the farm animals just loved him. I can just imagine Alex Cole Hamilton walking into the farmyard and just they all scatter.
Yes.
So the photo op turns into a disaster because it's just him trying to chase a lamb about because it refuses to get his picture taken with him.
Even the lamb's no voting for him. No, I think as well that when you look at Alex Cole Hamilton, so like his constituency seat as well, it was very much, it was like a cross sort of vote with the Labour vote, the Tory vote and all that type of thing. And I think that he himself tries to position himself as that true centrist, that sort of rhetoric around, I'm inclusive, I want to represent everybody, so therefore I'm just going to sit on the fence with everything, or I'm just going to, blow my own trumpet, essentially. And I don't trust him. I don't have any respect for him. And he's not funny, so this is just this is making me feel more sad about Willie Rennie leaving, because I wasn't necessarily feeling that sad about it, but now I do thinking about the alternative.
Yeah, I mean,
as I always say, I think it should be a woman that should take over.
They do have a female MSP amongst the four, but I don't know if she's interested.
I don't know if she's interested. Because what's her name? Is it Beatrice or something?
Beatrice Wishart for Shetland.
Let me remember that. Beatrice Wishart, famously known for standing watching the count when Alison Johnson was getting elected as the presiding officer. Just this one lone person in the room standing watching the count because nobody else was allowed in because of social distancing.
Another guy, in case you're interested, is Liam MacArthur.
Liam MacArthur, yeah. And
he's for Orkney.
Yeah, so basically you've got real strongholds in Scotland for Lib Dems, the Islands, North East 5, and is it Edinburgh, Southwestern?
Edinburgh Western.
Yeah.
For
I mean, Alex Cole Hamilton, like I said, the kind of main thing that I think of him is that incident during the committee meeting where he told, was it Mary Todd, I think it was, to fuck off. I remember when that kind of came out in the media and it became a story, I hadn't seen the original incident, and I was just kind of like, oh, who cares? Like, people swear. Like, obviously, people shouldn't swear during committee meetings, but there was a bit of peril clutching going on, I felt. And then I actually saw the video of it. Mm-hmm. And in my head, when I just heard, he told it to fuck off, I thought it was a kind of, fuck off. Like, because he, as a kind of don't talk shite sort of phrase. As we know, in Scotland, fuck off can be used in many different ways in many different situations. But it was it was a real kind of vicious, like you said, vitriolic. There was a nastiness in it that I thought, oh no, I'm not sure about you. Sorry again.
It's all right.
Matthew doesn't like you swearing.
And Matthew is upset because Willie Rennie is resigning as the leader of the Scottish Lib Dems.
Bring him on your knee, David.
Sorry, Caroline's home now, so she's taking them.
Oh, bless.
Nice. What a shame.
This is real life. This is babies. This is what parenting's like. You've got
Usually we just
the juggle.
It's like, Matthew's just really upset because Willie Rennie is standing down.
I know, he overheard the news and he's been overcome.
He had to be removed from the room because he's so upset.
So, Willie Rennie, enjoy your retirement. Alex Cole Hamilton, I'll look forward to taking the piss out of you for the next few years at least.
Yes, you will not replace my Willie Rennie, ever in my heart.
I just want a montage of all the times that Deborah has said really, really flat and nice things. When it jumps between like da-da-da, 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 and the video of the different positions you were in when you said it. That's what I want.
I'm sure there's a joke there about the only Willie Deborah's interested in.
I love it.
Oh, thanks. Right.
Moving on to our next item. Chaos in Downing Street. That might not qualify as news, I suppose, but a couple of things this week. Initially, the England football team were due to be hosted at a reception at Downing Street to celebrate their performance at this summer's European Championships, but it was announced that that's not happening anymore. There's a lot of speculation that this is related to some of the exchanges in social media between members of the squad and some Tory MPs regarding player support for taking the knee in support of racial justice and the racist abuse that members of the squad received in social media in the aftermath of their defeat to Italy. Yeah, there was a few different incidents. Priti Patel, who had initially said that fancied the right to boo players taking the knee because it was gesture politics, then tried to come out and condemn the racist abuse. And I think it was Tyrone Mings who basically said, well, you don't get to stoke up the sort of resentments and then try to hide when there's the inevitable consequences come out. I think there was similar criticisms from people in football towards Boris Johnson as well. And there was a Tory MP also come out when Marcus Rashford had missed the penalty to say maybe he should focus on penalties rather than politics, because obviously last summer he embarrassed the government by making them do a U-turn when they were quite happy to see children go hungry and not provide them school meals. Any thoughts on this then?
Yeah, I think it's, we can you never want to speculate why these things have been cancelled, but based on the sort of really high profile interaction that some of the squad had with Tory politicians, that tweet by Tyrone Mings, basically quote tweeting Priti Patel, got I think it was more than half a million likes. That's huge, and basically calling her out for not refusing to sort of back the decision of the England team to stand up against racism, basically make an anti-racist stance against something. So this is, the government doesn't like gesture politics, but happy to do gesture politics when it suits themselves. I think that basically the England team has completely shown up this government for what they are, single-handedly, much better than the leader of the opposition, I would argue, during that time. And there's something that working class people can connect to a lot more than politics, and that's football players. And I think them challenging that in a sort of different way, in a much more real way, because there's been loads of sort of comparisons against what Gary Neville was saying about Boris Johnson and this UK government is actually very similar to what Keir Starmer has been trying to say in the media, but just not landing it in a way that is relatable to people. So I think that where these players have been really vocal against, taking the knee and various other things, whether it be Marcus Rashford, supporting free school meals, that they communicate it in a way that people can receive that message almost in a non-political way. And the Tories do not like that at all.
Deborah?
I can't believe we're talking about football again. I like to think that the players got the invitation and went, no, I'm not going. And it sort of spread for there. No, I'm not going either. No, do you want to go? I'm not going. So who would end up turning up at the function anyway? But also, do we know who cancelled it? Was it the government? Were they pure?
There's been different. They're all trying to say that nobody really cancelled it, and I think the FA said that it was only ever going to happen if they won. which I don't quite buy. I think that's trying to cover it up. I think the main likely things that's happened is either, like you said, Deborah, the players have just been like, I'm not interested in going to this after the way we've been treated.
Mm-hmm.
Or I kind of lean more towards the second, is that Boris cancelled it because he was terrified of them showing him up. Because as much for a very divisive politician, I don't think Boris Johnson likes confrontation very much, and I think he would have been absolutely terrified that one of them would turn around right in front of all the cameras and publicly call him out, never mind on Twitter.
That would have been amazing.
Oh, that would have been brilliant. And I think if I was advising Boris Johnson, I probably would have said don't do it, because I think a couple of them would have. I think they would have had the guts to actually call him out to his face, and I think Boris would have struggled big time with that.
Maybe we're misreading it though. Maybe it was none of those things, and really all that was happening was the Prime Minister was trying to take responsibility and ensure that all the players had isolated after being abroad and that they were safe from COVID, because he's really into protecting his colleagues and work environment from. I can't keep it straight.
You tried.
Well, that kind of segues quite nicely into the second part of the sort of chaos down the street, as the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, tested positive for coronavirus, so he's self-isolating, and both Boris Johnson and the Chancellor of the Exchequer were identified as close contacts, but they just decided they weren't going to self-isolate. Suddenly there was a special, magical, secret pilot scheme that nobody had ever heard of before that meant that you didn't need to self-isolate. And by amazing coincidence, both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer was chosen for this random pilot scheme. They are now self-isolating, so he wouldn't have been able to go to the reception, I suppose, after yet another U-turn when the public were quite rightly up in arms that they were just tossing away the rules that everybody else has to abide by.
I read the U-turn took 157 minutes.
Yeah, but I mean, how long? That's 157 minutes before it became public. How long were they? How long were they wondering about? Like, I think Sajid Javid tested positive a couple of days ago. So how many people did Boris infect because he decided he wasn't going to self-isolate? Shocking.
Where do we sign up for this pilot scheme?
I know. And where do I sign up for the pilot scheme that perhaps I want to see what my life outcomes would be if I didn't have to pay my student loan back? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just want to choose that, pilot scheme for myself to be like, how much better would my life be if I just didn't have to pay my student loan back? Can I just appoint myself to do that? I think that's perfectly fair, and I think that this research needs to be done.
I think so too.
Special pilot scheme for not paying student loans.
Yeah. It's just
sign up at leftungag.org.
Yeah, imagine actually. First, there's a few. Obviously, we know that how the Tories make bad decisions all the time, right? But you think, how on earth did they think that was a good idea? Like,
or that they would get away with it.
Exactly. Like, have they not been watching what's going on? Like, people hate this idea of rules for one and rules for other, right? And this is the most blatant one I've seen, because we saw really early on how angry people were at Dominic Cummings and the Barnard Castle debacle and all these other things, the Matt Hancock affair, all these types of things. People do not, especially when people are making sacrifices and changes to their behaviour and isolated for loved ones and things like that. Not that that's as extreme as it is now, but people do not like the overt one rule for one rule for another. And I really don't know how they thought that would just be a good idea. And who came up with that really bad excuse? Like, why can't you just say, well, I'm double vaxxed, I'm the Prime Minister, so, I'm going to get tested every day, but I'm still going to go about my job. Like, what? It's a pilot.
They've been having coffee and crumpets or something, and they've went, oh, why have you not been isolating when you were contacted by Test and Trace? And somebody in the room has said, oh, they're on that pilot scheme. And then it's just grew for there. People are just panicking all the time, because what are they all about? They are running the country just on the back of ideas that they're just magicking up in their brain. I think it's insanity, really. It's that they're in charge of the country. And
it's these ideas are not even written on the back of a fag packet. They've not been written down.
No, they're just magicking
it. It's true. I love that.
The little waiters that come up and you're giving them their order and they're just like, it's all right, I'll remember it. And you're like, no, you're really not going to remember it.
And they never do, by the way, because I worked in hospitality for ages. And then you go to the computer screen and you're like, no idea what he just said. But I'm going to guess. It takes a lot of gall or delusion to think that you're going to get away with that. And like you said, the fact that they're responsible for coming out of the worst, the worst economic health disaster that we've had living memory is just wild.
It's the unspoken benefit of private education that you end up with this massive overconfidence, completely outstripping your abilities by miles.
We don't need a lockdown last October, and we will definitely have Christmas. I mean, that some delusion.
Well, we've got Freedom Day now. It's all right. They're all free to do what they want.
Dominic Cummings.
Until Gretna, they are.
Until Gretna, yes.
Dominic Cummings chipped in another grenade this morning. I don't know if you've heard it.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, Boris quite openly said that we wouldn't need a lockdown last August because it was only old people that would die. You know, the guy's just overflowing with compassion.
Yeah, and I quite believe that these sort of conversations actually happened, but again, Dominic Cummings was in a position to do something about it. And I saw this sort of like Twitter advert for the sort of Laura Kuenssberg like sort of style chat show that's going to be going on with Dominic Cummings. Why on earth was that not forced out of the government, at the time, so we could actually have maybe done something about it and perhaps not sort of fanned the Tory, saviours of the vaccination programme and these types of things. Perhaps if they were properly being held to account by the media, that perhaps they wouldn't have got such an easy ride at certain parts of the pandemic. It just makes me so angry.
Wasn't that in the thick of it? Malcolm Tucker had a sort of breakdown, then went on the telly, and then just before he was going to have the interview, put on one of his other spads. I'm pretty sure I've seen that chat show.
The current government, I think, are way beyond anything the thick of it came up with, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's true.
and it's we are beyond the point of being shocked now, and that's what scares me. The only thing that I was genuinely shocked about was the fact that they decided to completely bin all restrictions completely. I was expecting we'll drop everything, but we'll keep masks and social distancing in certain contexts or whatever. That shocked me. But see, anything else like this corruption, all these different things that's happening, I'm not shocked by them anymore. See, like that front page that's on the Mirror saying, because people are going to be over 80 and it doesn't really, basically essentially it doesn't matter because they're old and these people are going to die anyway. It doesn't surprise me, and that scares me. Because can you imagine even if Theresa May had said that, you'd be like, oh, what? This doesn't surprise me.
I'd read something surprising though that I was quite surprised at. The network LNER, the rail network.
Oh yeah.
That does the trains for Inverness to London. They're not going to mandate masks in the Scottish section of the route. How's that? Like they're just saying, oh, we're an English company, English rules. That's pretty surprising.
English rules for English trains.
Yeah.
The LNER thing is really, really interesting because I saw that sort of debate sort of flare up yesterday, and rightly so. Michael Matheson has sort of called it out, and I'm assuming there is going to be some pushback on that. But I think that it would be naive to think that there's social distancing on ScotRail trains at the moment, on buses, things like that. And I think that I can see where both parties are coming from because I've seen Scottish Labour tweet to that effect. But I think both things need to be addressed, because I know that there's reductions of ScotRail services. So now that they're starting to get busier, then they're starting to fill up. So we need to address social distancing on ScotRail as well as saying LNER.
I can see why people were annoyed with the LNER thing because it does look as if they've just sort of went, Scotland doesn't matter.
Yeah. But
there is a kind of practical thing, like when you think about it. So people all pile on the train in London, squeezed in, shoulder to shoulder, no masks. By the time they get to the Scottish border, they've infected each other anyway. So it would seem a bit silly for them to suddenly then go, right, now he's on a spacesuit and put a mask on, and vice versa. Wearing masks, and then as soon as they cross into England, right, it's all right, you can start licking each other's faces now, it's fine.
I just thought something in between, like
exactly,
wear a mask during your journey, sanitize your hands.
But if they're just going to whip them off at Gretna, then
these can be put in place. Like TFL have said that they're going to keep masks, all these types of things. And to be honest, I think it's really wrong the fact that all these train companies and stuff like that are not going to impose these sort of rules. But then of course there's the problematic because it's a business policy and blah blah blah. But I just don't understand why these rail companies or bus companies aren't just keeping this as standard anyway, because ultimately they'd be protecting their staff first and
that's
foremost,
the
and the
workers.
customers. And this is where we've got a real problem, and this is where I start going on my tirade about frontline service workers and masks, particularly without a government mandate to back it up, because all you're doing is just leaving this person who's probably on a minimum wage, probably on a shitty sort of flexible contract, having to police people to wear masks because, you know, the company says, oh, you have to wear a mask in here, but Boris Johnson's saying, oh, it's Freedom Day, it's fine. And then you've got some person stuck in the middle who's going to get a tidy day abuse and then told for the manager, oh, you need to be making sure people are wearing masks, and just these people stuck in the middle, and it's not fair.
Yeah, it's not fair.
But of course, there's other reason that the train companies might not bring it in, because less social distance means they can sell more tickets.
Capitalism.
Capitalism rules.
The whole LNER sort of controversy, my main thought was, why are we still getting trains going up between Inverness and London? We should be shutting the border, particularly with Freedom Day now, and the danger that England has got to turn into a factory for new strains of the virus. You know, we should be slamming that border shut as hard as we can.
And I think that the time is now for people like Andy Burnham, who was criticising Nicola Sturgeon before for imposing these types of rules, and actually really turn that pressure on the government in Westminster by creating the very sort of ways that the virus is going to increase. And then it is going to happen where the Scottish government or the Welsh government or other governments are going to turn around and say, you can't come here because your Westminster government is absolutely just lost the plot, you know? And I think that these people who have got a lot of following and a lot of clout need to be a lot more vocal than what they're being right now.
Well, other governments have already done it across the world, haven't they? Britain's on the red list. And I saw a video from New Zealand where their medical experts were like, we have no idea what's going on because the UK's got all these experts. They've got so much experience and knowledge that we don't understand why the government's doing this.
Capitalism.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
And the fact that Boris Johnson is on this special pilot scheme. So
yeah, that's
it's rolling out across the country.
And become have we not seen and was it not actually said that the UK is now a world problem?
Yeah.
Boris Johnson is a world problem. He's been a world problem for a long time, but now he's actually put the UK in a position where we're viewed as being a world problem.
Plague Island, that's what was trending.
Yeah.
Plague Island.
The Delta variant came about because the virus got out of control in India and burnt through part of the population and gave it a chance to evolve. There's the real danger that could happen now in England. And I read a thing that was saying it could be compounded by the fact that there is so many people vaccinated that there is enough that's not for it to burn through the population. But the fact that there's so many vaccinated people will increase the chances that it will, you know, come up with an even less super variant, which could put us back at square one.
And it's so scary. And I'm not really trying to, like, you know, take the heat off how serious this is. But see, when I saw that these types of things being spoken about, I just imagine that the UK is going to turn into like 28 days later, and I'm just going to be looking up at the sky and see the plane flying over, and all I want to do is just go on holiday, just get off Plague Island. And that is the image that is with me right now, because I just feel that's what's going to happen.
I prefer the Doomsday script where we build the wall right across North England and Scotland becomes the last sanctuary on the British Isles. And what's scary about that film is in London, in the film, that's where all the virus was exploding and they had crammed everybody inside the M25 corridor. And there was so many variants, they couldn't contain it. And in that film as well, the government was completely corrupt and inept. So let's hope that isn't what comes to fruition.
Let's really hope that's not what comes to fruition. But it's
really optimistic when we've got to a stage now where our hope for the future is let's not be 28 days later.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great moment to plug Film Club, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be recording our second episode of Ungagged Film Club this week. We'll be reviewing a spoiler review of the 90s sci-fi classic Starship Troopers. We've also got, if you've missed last month's Ungagged Film Club, you can find that on leftungagged.org, where you can hear about our views on the 2014 film Pride. Next up, we're going to talk about, we sort of started a wee bit early there, but we'll be talking about more Tory corruption.
More Tory corruption. More Tory corruption.
Ewan Ferguson, a city solicitor, was announced on Thursday as one of 2 new members for the Committee on Standards in Public Life. A Whitehall source said the appointment was approved by 10 Downing Street. And if you don't know what the Committee on Standards in Public Life is, I'll just explain it. It's advising the Prime Minister on ethical issues. It's conducting broad inquiries into standards of conduct. And it involves promoting 7 principles of public life, which are selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. So who is Ewan Ferguson? Well, he went to uni with Boris Johnson and is an old pal of his from the Bullingdon Club. You know the famous picture of the Bullingdon Club? Yeah, he's the one in the back row, just behind Boris and to the right of David Cameron. So I'm sure he'll do a great job of keeping Boris honest. That's just the latest example of more Tory corruption.
More Tory corruption. More Tory corruption. More Tory corruption.
So our next segment, we'll be talking about the continuing decline of GB News. GB News reached new lows in the last week when some of its channels actually managed to attract 0 viewers during some of its broadcasts. The right-wing broadcasters had a rocky start. It's been plagued with production problems since it launched, and its rapidly declining viewing figures has continued. They then managed to alienate the very last cohort of viewers when one of the presenters, Guto Harry, took the knee live in air in solidarity against the racist abuse suffered by England football players. And the self-proclaimed defenders of free speech and opponents of cancel culture, their response to that was to suspend Guto Harry and describe his actions as an unacceptable breach of our standards. So GB News, have you been watching, guys? Obviously, you've not been watching some programmes because nobody was watching some of them. Deborah?
No, I was talking to my girlfriend about it this morning, and she went, "What is this? Who's GB News?" And I thought that summed it up perfectly. And I said, "The Alex Neil thing, the new TV programme." And she went, "Oh, that's a shame. We knew that it wasn't going to get big views and that. Maybe they'll suddenly realise, maybe it's us that have got this all wrong." That's wishful thinking, isn't it?
Maybe people aren't as racist as we thought.
Maybe are we a bit fascist here? Are we the baddies? You know, insert meme.
I haven't been watching, but I did see. I sometimes just pop on to GB News to see, because they always like to share their great videos of some really compelling speeches that the presenters make, and it's almost that kind of one-to-one camera moment of a sort of liberation or something that is just, the kind of, you're like the proper thing that expects to go viral, but with GB News it maybe gets about 300 likes or something. And then it was the Neil Oliver one, particularly about mask wearing and Freedom Day, but it's just, Groundhog Day, because it's the countdown to the next lockdown. And I thought, well, at least there's something truthful in GB News, because Freedom Day is more likely for there to be further restrictions in the future. But that whole narrative was just so about his own ego, about ableism, because if people are vulnerable or people are old or whatever, it's about how difficult it is for him and his children to have to wear masks, and it's important to see people's facial expressions and blah blah blah. And in my head I was thinking, I'm sure people that have got visual impairments would love to be able to do this. I'm sure people that are vulnerable for in loads of other ways would love to do all the things you're talking about. But actually you are making people who might have any forms of vulnerabilities just so much more at risk because of your complete selfish attitude. Which just reeks of it. But the fact that they're getting 0 views is not surprising, because I know that we spoke about GB News first of all when the GB News fails were going viral, and production value was just amazing. And I'm still laughing at that video of the woman that was trying to do the interview on the boat, and then she goes up and then it cuts to her in a different dress walking onto the boat. Honestly, the first time I watched that, I showed it to Glenn and I was actually crying with just how ridiculous it was. Anyway, and I remember saying then, I was like, I don't think this is going to last. But we were like, there's so much money getting ploughed into it. And Andrew Neil's decided to take a wee break after it being on air, I think for 2 or 3 weeks, and he's just never come back. So
there is a lot of speculation that he's actually left for good, and he can't say because of a non-disclosure agreement. Somebody checked. And he's not retweeted any content for GB News since near the beginning of July.
It's amazing. I love it. And he's it's literally like he's just been edited out, like one of those really bad cut to moments. It's like it just was never seen again. But yeah, it's just Andrew Neil was just, and he just thought he was so great, and it was just the best thing ever. And he was done that massive opening and that big speech about how it's going to be different and open and accepting. Yet they're cancelling somebody for making a decision that is like standing up for anti-racism. It's actually hilarious, and this is I think it's the best thing ever. That I really can't see this lasting much longer than into next year, to be honest. And I'm quite happy to watch this just burn out, basically.
Alex Neil. Oh, sorry. On you go, Dave.
I saw
Is
that.
it Alex Neil?
No, I think it is Andrew Neil. I said Alex.
It's Andrew Neil.
Sorry.
Alex Neil's the MSP.
I said Alex Neil as well. Sorry.
I think I then said it as well. Sorry, Alex Neil. We don't mean you. Yeah, I saw that Neil Oliver monologue, and with it, very often with Neil Oliver, I always hate what he's saying and love how he says it because I just love his voice. I used to like his documentaries before he started talking about his politics. And I thought if you just take the first 2 minutes of that monologue, it's actually a really lovely sort of sad poem about how him and his family are struggling with lockdown. And then it just veers off into like this mad right-wing conspiracy and how we should just pretend the virus doesn't exist, basically, so that Neil and his kids can be less sad.
I think Andrew Neil's treated GB News like many people treat a gym, really enthusiastically for the first 3 weeks. And just kids on, it nothing to do with him.
Literally, yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Keep paying the subs for another 5 years.
That video of Neil Oliver, it was just so classic Neil Oliver, wasn't it? He was sitting with his wee scarf around his neck, staring deeply into the camera. And you're right, David, it was very poetic to begin with. And then he just was like, he went off in one. That's the only way to describe it. He went very far right.
He always seems to think everything he's saying is so deeply profound. And we should listen.
And how long,
very carefully.
And like how long was the actual video that the GB News thought, this is great content, we're just going to keep it going, nobody's going to be in his earpiece going, wrap it up. And it's like, and then they shared the whole thing on Twitter. Yeah. And it's like, they just think they're great. They just think they're great. And I'm like, keep at it. Because even right-wingers are going to be like, this is a joke. Surely folk are going to be like, this isn't for me.
Well, they've kind of done a Hail Mary pass to get them out the hole. Did you see who they've brought in to save them?
No.
Katie Hopkins.
Nigel Farage.
Oh, even worse.
Nigel's now got his own show.
Well, it's good that, Farage has gone from having his own show on the BBC to GB News. So.
Yeah, I mean, if it keeps him off Question Time, then that's a plus.
Yeah.
It's InfoWars. This is the InfoWars 2.0 UK edition. That's what GB News is.
Yeah, I think there was a senior editor left recently as well, and the speculation was that editor wanted to focus on sort of regional news stories and sort of things that weren't getting covered, and he was forced out with the ones that just wanted to be like culture wars, talk about who can use certain toilets, and is Christmas getting cancelled, and why is that person not wearing a poppy? Because it's July.
I can imagine that in November, as soon as it gets to be like, it'll be like, I can imagine it being a nice merge of Halloween scare stories, of images of people and politicians that are not wearing poppies.
I'd also like to see their set. I imagine they've got like just big poppy wreaths around their necks, and then you imagine their graphics come Poppy Day. It'll just be poppy, 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 dead soldier, poppy, 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 poppy.
I mean, when you look at the levels the BBC are with the poppy thing, I mean, remember the best one was when they made the Cookie Monster on the one show with a poppy. Oh, it's a puppet.
Did they actually just directly pin it to his skin? That's
yes.
Muppet abuse.
Which must have been painful.
Yeah.
And that's
painful. It's a puppet. What am I talking about?
I don't know. Obviously got the giggles this morning. Yeah, the poppyism. That's another debate for another day. I know GB News, really, really enjoying the slow decline and hoping that's the end of it, basically.
It'll be interesting to see where Farage draws them in viewers, because he does have a following amongst the sort of the far right, basically.
I forgot he existed because I muted the word Nigel Farage and muted him like when I first set my new Twitter account back up last year. And it's like I totally forgot he existed, and then he just sort of appeared on something, and I was like, oh, I actually forgot about him. It's the same with George Galloway. I'd done the same thing with George Galloway, but until it got really close to the Scottish elections, I was like, I totally forgot about him. And do you know how good that is for your mental health?
It's no good when you're preparing for a news programme, though, because you'd absolutely no idea he was on GB News.
That's true. But to be fair, I do my reading for a podcast. Doesn't my reading.
You do more than GB News then?
I read longer than how
It's
many
crazy
numbers of views.
It's crazy to think this podcast gets higher viewers than some of GB News. They're on they're transmitted into everybody's telly.
You know, that's something to really aspire towards, and I think it's a really positive thing, and it's a real reflection of the quality of the production that we put into this.
So I was just going to say, it'd be really funny if they said such and such programme had one viewer. Imagine being that viewer. You'd be like, that was me. I watched that.
And they'd be like, that's that time. I sat down with a cup of tea at 2:30 on Tuesday, and I watched some GB News, and I was the only viewer that watched that. And I'm 100% of their viewership, and then they feel really special.
And then you think, actually, I was looking at my phone most of the time it was on.
What a shame.
Okay, we'll move on to our next segment. So, Willie Rennie wasn't the only leader to stand down in the UK this week. Sion Berry also stood down as leader of one of the co-leaders of the Green Party of England and Wales. She announced she wouldn't be seeking re-election to the position. This was after internal election resulted in some gender-critical candidates being elected to spokesperson roles. Sion Berry made trans rights a big part of her recent campaign to become London mayor and did not feel she could lead the party when they were not united on this issue. Deborah, thoughts?
Well, it was kind of reminiscent for me, what happened with the SNP and NEC elections and stuff, and how some of the gender critical women got into positions. I was blocked by the Equalities representative at the time on the NEC, and then they all left and went to Alapa Party. So I felt Sian's sort of frustrations when I was reading the article. She was getting annoyed about it, rightly so. We always talk about this sort of subject on the podcast, and I just always want to say we support trans folk, we are allies, solidarity to you. It's just a mess, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I think this issue with the sort of Green Party England and Wales has been bubbling for a while. I think although Sian Berry in her letter didn't actually name anybody specifically, I think we definitely know who that is. I'm going to avoid saying his name just in case that could perhaps allege certain things. But this person was elected into the party's front bench as a spokesperson. And I think that's where it became a little bit too much for Sian in terms of this, I don't feel like we can speak with one voice on this really important issue. And I know that for Sian, that was something that was really quite at the heart of the London Mayor campaign about inclusion and trans rights and non-binary people and all these really, really important issues. And I think that she felt that was being undermined because of this particular individual. And I know that there's been a lot of really angry and vocal people in the Scottish Greens about distancing themselves from the Green Party of England and Wales over this particular issue. And I think that would have been probably really difficult for Sian to see because she is so supportive of these types of rights and LGBTQ plus in general. So it is actually a really selfless thing to do, I think, for Sian to say, she feel that she's kind of taken it a bit on herself to say that, it's some kind of almost failure in her leadership. But to an extent, it is a positive thing that the Green Party is so democratic and these people can be elected into these positions because some of the participation in the turnout is really low. And it's probably the same in a lot of political parties. But, she's saying that she feels it was some kind of failure on her. And I really, really don't think it was. And I think what she's done is completely redeemed herself, particularly by doing this and saying, you know what, I'm not going to stand as leader again, in the next cycle of elections because I've been elected, into the London, and I want to focus on what my commitments were to trans people in the areas that I represent. And I think that's really something to be positive and something to be applauded, essentially.
It's very admirable, isn't it?
Very, very much so. Very much so. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I was just going to say, there is a lot of confusion. I saw in terms of the Scottish Green Party and the Green Party of England and Wales. They are separate parties. It is not a case like Scottish Labour and Labour where the Scottish section is like an offshoot of the UK section. They're completely separate, and I've seen some completely wrong articles in the newspapers specifically referring to the National Green Party, which doesn't exist. And I've saw other articles where they've got it right, but at the end it says this has been updated to correct. So clearly people have been getting in touch to correct that. I think it speaks quite highly of Shanberry. As a leader in a lot of parties, as leader, you get to a point who your frontbench team is. It's not. I don't think it's a bad thing to be more democratic, like the Green Party of England and Wales are. And I respect her stance where she's saying, although they don't get to, as a leader, you don't get to a point, you have a great deal of influence. And she feels that she's not been able to use that influence to get the right candidates elected, basically. And it's a very admirable sort of decision she's made to step down for the role because of that. And she's drawn attention to this issue that's clearly been festering in the Green Party of England and Wales for a while. It's maybe something that the SNP could be criticised for, that they didn't confront this issue till really they couldn't escape it when the creation of Alba, most of them left. And then bizarrely, I was thinking as you were saying that, Deborah, how angry a lot of the people that were elected into position in the SNP, once they left, they were angry that they get replaced. And it was like, you can't join another party and still be the equalities spokesperson for that party you've left. And they were furious about that. Yeah, it's sad because to see parties that are generally in the progressive wing be sort of infiltrated by more reactionary elements is worrying, because you then kind of take the fight to the Tories because you're too busy trying to sort your own house out. That's the point.
No, and I'm worried that where this might lead in terms of what the party, what the leadership candidates might be in the future, and who might be attracted to join that party to try and bolster perhaps somebody who does hold, should we say, anti-trans or gender critical views. That concerns me quite a lot. And I think that it's really good to highlight that difference between the Scottish Greens and the Green Party of England and Wales, because I've been quite critical of the Green Party of England and Wales on several things. One thing being taking positions in the House of Lords, things like that. And that is that they're totally separate, and the Green Party, the Scottish Greens, have a completely different view on that they would never accept a peerage or at all. And I think that this particular issue too, I think the Scottish Greens have been much more together on this particular issue, and in the code of conduct, it very much states that you've got to respect everybody, you've got to respect particularly minorities and groups like that, and it's up to the democratic processes of the Scottish Greens to ensure that stays the same. And what I got really, really angry about was when Andy Whiteman, so it was December, I think it was, where he announced that it was being authoritarian on its views on trans and he felt excluded. Well, actually, these things over time are debated, motions are debated, and people take positions, they put arguments forward, and policy is put in place. And the Scottish Greens is really, really democratic as well. And they try and deliver, decision making as close to their different members as they can. And that's why we get criticised for not standing in seats, because it's up to the local party where they stand and if they stand and if they can afford to stand. And that's a really, really good thing. But to turn around and say it's authoritarian on certain issues, and are not open to debate, I think was the actual terminology that was used, is absolutely ridiculous. And I think that, veering back towards the Green Party of England and Wales, I really, really hope that we don't see the Green Party of England and Wales head in a sort of more regressive direction when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights, because, I think queer liberation is so interlinked when it comes to the climate, having a fair society and all these types of things. And, if we want to stand in solidarity with, nature, with animals, with each other as human beings, that is interlinked with queer liberation. And you cannot exclude particularly small groups of that LGBTQ plus community and try and sell a progressive vision to the UK to perhaps start to build your MPs in Westminster. It's just not conducive.
Yeah, I think the Scottish Green Party will be vindicated in their sort of zero tolerance approach that they've taken to transphobia. It's just, I'm not sure. I'm a member of the Scottish Green Party. I'm not sure I would have joined the Green Party of England and Wales if I lived in England.
No.
Just like some of the things you said there, Brian, about the taking seats in the House of Lords, and just in a lot of issues, they come across to me as a bit more sort of radical liberal as opposed to sort of more socialistic that the Scottish Green Party is.
Yep.
But they're certainly in the sort of side of the angels down there, and there's not many options for progressive voters in England. Labour are a shambles now under Starmer, who seems intent to drag them further and further to the right, chasing soft Tory voters. I don't think the Lib Dems are much an option, so it's disappointing to see another progressive option for voters in England sort of potentially dissolving into a kind of internal struggle.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
I would just say from the experience of having members elected internally in the SNP that have been gender critical, they stumble themselves because they're so ultra focused on being gender critical. And I think they will out themselves, so to speak, because as you say, most of the membership of the English and Welsh Green Party is that it's the liberal, sort of libertarian vote. I don't think there'll be a breakaway Green Party that's transphobic that would say that.
Maybe it would be good if there was.
Yeah,
because I think it's definitely benefited the SNP having Alba create and draw the poison. It
was like a poultice.
Gave them somewhere to go.
I completely agree, and I think that if there was to be a sort of breakaway Green Party, because of the electoral system in England, but specifically in their obsession with first past the post in so many places, that if there was, I don't think it would have much of an appeal and success. But it might actually be a positive thing, like you say with Alba. Even with our slightly more progressive voting system up here, it had no impact. So, and I think that that's just a real lesson for people listening, that because we get so bogged down because we're so generally engaged in social media and we're engaged in this debate, and to stand in solidarity with our trans and non-binary siblings, and the gender critical people try to kind of portray this as being mainstream and try to portray this as being so much bigger than it is. But actually, when you look at polling that's done, particularly in women, that either they're really quite ambivalent about it, or they're like, of course people should be able to identify with what gender they believe they are. So, and you look at the electoral performance of places like Alba, and I think Alba, one of its main selling points was get indie ref and exclude trans folk, and that was quite obvious all the way through the campaign. So that is such a tiny vote. And I think it's really important for people out there listening that Twitter's not real life, and I've got to remind myself that sometimes Twitter and what people are saying and shouting over each other and trying to exclude trans folk, that's no real life. And actually, if you speak to women particularly, all the women that I speak to in my life that have ever mentioned this particular topic area, they're always a bit like, can you tell me more about that? But of course, trans people should be able to identify with how they choose, but can you explain to me the process? Because they don't even know. And if you explain to somebody, if you want to get a birth certificate that matches your identity, you at the moment need to go through, you've got to live as that individual for that gender for 2 years, and you've got to prove it, medical interventions, you've got to pay for it. And then you've got these, gender critical people saying, oh, well, what rights do trans people, not have that they should have? And we're like, there's one example.
Exactly.
It's so exclusionary. It's unreal. Imagine if you had to go through a 2-year process and pay all this money and prove things to be classed as a woman. Do you know what I mean? It really, really makes me angry, as it normally does. But we're standing in solidarity with them all, and
definitely.
That's a great thing.
Like you said, Twitter isn't real life. In the general population, these gender critical folk are a very, very small number who are, their voice is artificially inflated by a lot of dark, shady money. And I totally agree with what you said, Deborah. They do out themselves as being total cranks eventually. I saw a tweet like recently where a woman was trying to talk about how women were now suffering because of the trans ideology, because she now needs to get her husband to come with her into public toilets to keep her safe. And you're just like, it's just a complete lie. But too much a crank to even see the ludicrousness of her position. I'm scared about men being in toilets, so I'm bringing my husband with me to stand guard and intimidate every other woman in there. And it's like, you're worried about trans people. Well, her husband's conducting security duties in the middle of a woman's bathroom.
And going back to Mary Black, who obviously speaks so amazingly on this topic at all times. There was a video on the website Joe, I think it was a couple of years ago, and she's saying because how she presents herself as a woman, she's been challenged about being in women's spaces, and if you want to start policing who should be in women's spaces by how people look, well, you're just reinforcing that patriarchy, literally just inflating it even more and making it worse. And they can't see how bad and ridiculous that position is. To, well, I'm scared of men being in toilets, so I'll bring my own man in. So how does that make other women feel? They walk into, if this even happened, you walk into the loo and there's some guy standing guard. It's just nuts.
Asking for your passports to make sure you're female. That's what he was doing.
Well, if they'll be struggling if that X comes through, and
Exactly.
somebody's like, boom, I'm an X, whatever.
It just confirms my theory that gender critical folk are self-absorbed. They don't see beyond their own blinkers, so to speak. That's all that happens. It's very, very frustrating. And I feel for Shan, to be honest, because she's almost martyred herself for this cause. So just, I want to applaud her, a wee round of applause for her.
And
for
she
standing up for trans rights, like Mary Black has done so many times. And I like to see these women politicians who have, good platforms to speak on to call this bullshit out, because that's what it is. It's fucking bullshit.
Yes.
And on that note, thanks for joining us, guys. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you want to see anything more from Ungagged, you can go to leftungagged.org. We've got articles there. There's former episodes of Holyrude Ungagged if you haven't listened to them all before. There's also the first episode of Ungagged Film Club, where we review the movie Pride, and look out for Ungagged Film Club episode 2, Starship Troopers, which will be up soon. On that note, take care, everybody, and we'll speak to you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.